The iron grip around Rebecca Norwood's arm sent a shock of pain through her entire body, making her gasp as fingers dug into her flesh hard enough to leave marks that would darken by morning. "You listen here, girl," Frank Donovan snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey and tobacco as he yanked her closer to him in the dusty yard behind the main ranch house. "When I tell you to have coffee ready at 5 in the morning, I mean 5 sharp, not 5 past. You understand me?" Rebecca's brown eyes watered from the pain, but she refused to cry out or beg. She had learned in her 22 years that showing weakness to men like Frank only made things worse. The foreman of the Triple Creek Ranch had been getting rougher with her and the other staff for weeks now, ever since the owner had left for Denver on business. Without Mr. Patterson around to keep him in check, Frank had become a tyrant, ruling over the ranch hands and house staff with threats and violence. "I understand," she managed to say through gritted teeth, her free hand instinctively reaching to pry his fingers from her arm. Frank squeezed harder, his weathered face twisted in cruel satisfaction. "You better. Because next time it will not just be your arm I am grabbing." The threat hung in the air between them, clear and vile. Rebecca's stomach turned, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension like a blade through butter. "Let her go." The words were spoken quietly, but they carried a weight that made Frank's head snap up. Rebecca's eyes followed, and she saw a figure standing near the corner of the barn, partially shadowed by the late afternoon sun of that August day in 1882. The man was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sky behind him. His dark hair fell past his shoulders in waves that looked like they had been tamed only by the wind, and his face was all hard angles and sun-bronzed skin. He wore buckskin pants and a simple linen shirt that strained against muscles earned from years of survival in the wilderness. "This does not concern you, stranger," Frank said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. His grip on Rebecca's arm loosened slightly. The mountain man stepped forward, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. Now that he was closer, Rebecca could see his eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over a mountain peak. They were currently fixed on Frank with an intensity that made the foreman take a half step backward. "I am making it my concern," the stranger said. His voice was deep and rough like gravel underfoot. "The lady asked you to let go." "I did not," Rebecca started to say, confused, but then she realized her hands were still pulling at Frank's fingers, still trying to free herself. That counted, apparently, in this man's eyes. Frank's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. He released Rebecca's arm with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. "You have no business here. This is private property and I am the foreman. I will have you thrown off this land." "Try it," the stranger said simply. For a moment, Rebecca thought Frank might actually be stupid enough to attack this mountain of a man. The foreman's hand even drifted toward the pistol at his hip. But then something in the stranger's stance, or perhaps the absolute lack of fear in those gray-blue eyes, made Frank think better of it. "You will regret this," Frank spat, pointing a finger at the stranger. Then he turned that finger toward Rebecca. "And you, girl, you are on thin ice. One more mistake and you will find yourself without a position." He stormed off toward the bunkhouse, his boots kicking up dust with each angry step. Rebecca stood frozen, cradling her injured arm against her chest. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she felt shaky and uncertain. She looked up at the stranger who had intervened, not sure whether to thank him or be angry that he might have just cost her the only job she had. "You all right?" he asked, his voice gentler now as he approached her. Up close, he was even more imposing, but something in his expression was kind, concerned. "I will be fine," Rebecca said automatically, then winced as she touched her arm. The pain was sharp and throbbing, and she knew without looking that bruises were already forming. "Let me see." It was not quite a command, but it was not really a request either. The stranger reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, his large, calloused hands gently took her arm and pushed up the sleeve of her plain cotton dress. Rebecca heard him draw in a breath when he saw the marks. Frank's fingers had left perfect impressions in her pale skin, already turning purple and red. There were other bruises too, older ones fading to yellow and green, from previous rough treatment. "He has done this before," the stranger said, and it was not a question. Rebecca pulled her arm back, tugging her sleeve down to hide the evidence. "It is not your concern. I appreciate your help, but Frank was right about one thing. You do not have any business here, and if Mr. Patterson comes back to find you have been causing trouble with his foreman, there will be hell to pay." "My name is Zachary Ashford," the man said, ignoring her attempt to dismiss him. "I am here about the timber contract. Mr. Patterson wrote to me 3 months ago about supplying logs for the new barn and fencing repairs." Rebecca's eyes widened. She remembered Mr. Patterson mentioning something about hiring a mountain man who knew the best timber in the high country. "You are the logger from the mountains." "Among other things," Zachary said, "I trap, hunt, guide, whatever pays." He tilted his head, studying her face. "What is your name, Rebecca?" "Rebecca Norwood." She glanced toward the bunkhouse where Frank had disappeared. "You should be careful of Frank. He has friends among the ranch hands, and they are not kind to people who cross him." "I can take care of myself," Zachary assured her. "Have been doing it for a long time." "How long?" The question slipped out before Rebecca could stop it. She was curious about this man who had appeared like something out of a dime novel, all muscle and quiet confidence. "Since I was 15, Zachary said. "I am 28 now, so I guess that makes 13 years in the mountains and wilderness." He paused. "What about you? How long have you been working here?" 2 years, Rebecca said. "Since my father died and left me with nothing but debts. Mr. Patterson was kind enough to hire me as a housekeeper and cook. The pay is not much, but it includes room and board, and I have been able to save a little." She did not know why she was telling this stranger her life story. Perhaps it was because he had helped her, or perhaps it was because there was something in his eyes that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a very long time. "Where is Mr. Patterson now?" Zachary asked. "Denver. He left 6 weeks ago to meet with investors about expanding the ranch. He should be back in another 2 weeks." Rebecca twisted her hands together. "Frank has been getting worse since he left. He drinks more and he is rougher with everyone, but especially with me and the other women." Zachary's jaw tightened. "Other women? There are 3 of us who work in the house, myself, Sarah, and Maria. Sarah is Frank's cousin, so he leaves her mostly alone, but Maria and I—" Rebecca trailed off, not wanting to speak the words aloud. "He has hurt Maria too," Zachary finished for her. Rebecca nodded. "Not as bad as he could have. Not yet, but it is only a matter of time before he goes further than bruises." She looked up at Zachary, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt tears threatening to fall. "I do not know what to do. If I leave, I have nowhere to go. If I stay—" "You will not have to worry about Frank anymore," Zachary said with such certainty that Rebecca almost believed him. "You cannot watch over me every hour of every day," Rebecca said, trying to be practical even as a small part of her heart wanted to believe this strong, kind stranger could somehow make everything better. "You have your work to do and I have mine." "Then I will work close by," Zachary said. "I need to survey the timber anyway, and I need a place to stay while I am doing the logging. I will talk to the other ranch hands about boarding in the bunkhouse." Rebecca's eyes widened in alarm. "No. If you stay in the bunkhouse with Frank and his friends, they will make your life miserable. Or worse." She bit her lip, thinking. "There is a small cabin on the north edge of the property. It used to be the line shack before they built a new one closer to the winter pastures. It is not much, but it has a roof and a stove. Sounds like a palace compared to some places I have stayed," Zachary said with a hint of a smile that transformed his severe features into something almost boyish. "Will you show me?" Rebecca hesitated. She still had work to do before supper, and if she disappeared for too long, Frank would have another excuse to punish her. But Zachary had helped her, and it seemed only right to return the favor. "All right," she said, "but we need to be quick." The walk to the old line shack took them away from the main ranch buildings, through a grove of cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade from the Oklahoma heat. It was the height of summer in Tulsa, and the temperature had been hovering near 90 degrees for weeks. Rebecca was used to it after 2 years, but she still found herself longing for the cool evenings of her childhood home in Missouri. "You are not from here originally," Zachary observed as they walked. It was not a question. "How did you know?" Rebecca asked. "The way you move." "You are not comfortable in the heat." He paused. "Also, you have not got the accent. Most people around here have a certain way of talking. You sound more northern." "Missouri," Rebecca confirmed. "A small town called Liberty. My father was a shopkeeper until he got sick. The medical bills took everything we had, and after he died, the bank took the shop. I had an aunt in Kansas, but she died before I could get there. So I kept moving south, looking for work until I ended up here." "No other family?" Zachary asked gently. "None that wanted me," Rebecca said, and could not quite keep the bitterness from her voice. "My father had a brother, but he made it clear when I wrote to him that he had his own family to worry about. My mother died when I was born, so there was no one on her side either." They walked in silence for a moment before Zachary spoke again. "I am sorry." "For what?" Rebecca glanced at him. "For your losses. For the fact that you have been alone." He met her eyes. "No one should have to be alone." "You are alone," Rebecca pointed out. "You live in the mountains by yourself, do you not?" "I do," Zachary acknowledged. "But that is my choice. It sounds like you did not have much choice in the matter." Rebecca could not argue with that. She had been alone not because she wanted to be, but because circumstances had left her no other option. It was a lonely existence, made worse by the fact that she was surrounded by people every day but had no real friends, no real connections. The line shack came into view, a small structure made of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a single window. It looked weathered and forgotten, but when Rebecca pushed open the door, she was relieved to see that it was mostly clean inside. There was a narrow bed frame with no mattress, a small table with 2 chairs, and the promised stove in the corner. "It needs some work," Rebecca said apologetically. "It is perfect," Zachary said, and he sounded like he meant it. He set down the pack he had been carrying, which Rebecca only now realized was stuffed full of supplies. "I have a bedroll in here and I can hunt for food. This will do just fine." Rebecca watched as he moved around the small space, his large frame somehow not seeming out of place in the cramped cabin. He moved efficiently, unpacking his things with the ease of someone who had made camp in far less comfortable locations. "I should get back," Rebecca said reluctantly. "Supper will not cook itself, and if I am late, Frank will notice." Zachary turned to face her, his expression serious. "Rebecca, I want you to understand something. If Frank touches you again, or if anyone else tries to hurt you, you come find me. Day or night, it does not matter. You come find me." "Why?" The question burst out of Rebecca before she could stop it. "Why do you care? You do not even know me." Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his gray-blue eyes studying her face as if he was trying to memorize every detail. "Because no one should have to live in fear," he finally said. "And because when I saw him hurting you, something in me knew I could not walk away." He paused. "I do not expect you to understand. I barely understand it myself. But I know that I meant what I said. No one is going to bruise your skin again, not while I am here." The conviction in his voice sent a shiver down Rebecca's spine despite the heat. She wanted to dismiss his words as foolish bravado, but there was something in his eyes that made her believe him. This man, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, genuinely meant to protect her. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting her voice to be any stronger. Zachary nodded. "Go on back now, but remember what I said." Rebecca hurried back to the main house, her mind spinning. She had been on her own for so long, had learned to rely only on herself, that the idea of someone wanting to protect her was almost foreign. She did not know what to make of Zachary Ashford, this mountain man with kind eyes and a protective streak. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just become much more complicated. That evening, as Rebecca prepared supper for the ranch hands, she could not stop thinking about Zachary. Her arm throbbed where Frank had grabbed her, a constant reminder of both the violence she had endured and the intervention that had stopped it. Sarah, a plump woman in her mid-30s with graying blonde hair, noticed Rebecca favoring her arm as she worked. "Frank again?" Sarah asked quietly, glancing toward the door to make sure no one was listening. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Sarah was Frank's cousin, but she had never approved of his behavior. Unfortunately, her disapproval did not extend to actually standing up to him. "You should be more careful," Sarah said, which was her standard response. "Try not to provoke him." "I did not provoke him," Rebecca snapped, her patience finally fraying. "I was 2 minutes late with the coffee because Maria burned herself on the stove and I was helping her. Frank decided that was worth hurting me over." Sarah winced. I know, but you know how he gets when he has been drinking. It is best to just stay out of his way." "That is easy for you to say," Rebecca muttered, but she did not push it further. Sarah meant well, but she was too afraid of Frank to be any real help. Maria, a petite Mexican woman of 20 years, came in from the dining room carrying a tray of dirty dishes. Her dark eyes were worried as she looked at Rebecca. "Are you all right? I saw what happened outside." "I am fine," Rebecca said, which was not entirely true but was easier than explaining everything. "A man intervened before Frank could do worse." "What man?" Maria asked, setting the tray down. "A mountain man named Zachary Ashford. He is here to do timber work for Mr. Patterson." Rebecca began dishing stew into bowls for the ranch hands. "He is staying in the old line shack." Maria's eyes widened. "The big man with the long hair. I saw him earlier when he rode in. He looks like he could break Frank in half." "Maybe he will," Rebecca said without thinking, then immediately regretted it when Sarah gasped. "Rebecca, you should not say such things. Frank is family, no matter how poorly he behaves sometimes." "Sometimes." Rebecca could not help the incredulous laugh that escaped her. "Sarah, he hurts people. He hurts me and Maria, and he threatens the ranch hands who do not do exactly what he wants. That is not just poor behavior. That is cruelty." Sarah's face flushed, and for a moment Rebecca thought she might actually agree, but then the older woman shook her head. "It is not our place to judge. We are just the help." Rebecca bit back the angry response that rose in her throat. There was no point in arguing with Sarah. The woman had spent her whole life being subservient to men, and she was not going to change now. The ranch hands filed in for supper, and Rebecca and Maria served the food while Sarah supervised from the kitchen. Frank came in last, his eyes immediately finding Rebecca. She could feel his gaze on her like a physical touch, and she forced herself not to react, not to show any of the fear and revulsion churning in her stomach. "Where is the new man?" one of the ranch hands asked. "The mountain man who arrived this afternoon. Probably ran off when he realized what kind of operation we run here," another hand said with a laugh. "He is staying in the old line shack," Frank said, his voice carrying across the room. "Though I doubt he will last long. Men like that are not used to taking orders." "Will he be eating with us?" the first hand asked. "I do not care what he does," Frank said dismissively, "as long as he does his job and stays out of my way." Rebecca said nothing, but she felt a small spark of relief. If Frank was planning to ignore Zachary, maybe there would not be any conflict. Maybe Zachary could do his work and leave, and Rebecca could go back to surviving day by day until Mr. Patterson returned. But even as she thought it, Rebecca knew it was wishful thinking. Men like Frank did not forget when someone challenged them, and Zachary had definitely challenged him by interfering earlier. There would be trouble. It was only a matter of when. After the ranch hands finished eating and left for the bunkhouse, Rebecca and Maria cleaned up the kitchen while Sarah counted the supplies for the next day. Rebecca's arm was aching worse than ever, and she was exhausted, but there was still work to be done. "You should put something cold on that," Maria said, nodding toward Rebecca's arm. "It will help with the swelling." Rebecca nodded. "I will after we finish here." "I can finish," Maria offered. "You should rest." "We both know that if I leave you to do everything, Frank will use it as an excuse to complain," Rebecca said. "I will be fine." They worked in silence for a while, washing dishes and putting away food. Rebecca's mind kept drifting to Zachary, wondering what he was doing in the line shack, wondering if he was serious about his promise to protect her. She wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her to be cautious about trusting people, especially men. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear Frank come into the kitchen until he spoke. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you." Rebecca's heart jumped into her throat. She turned slowly, putting the dish she was holding back in the wash basin. Frank stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. Maria froze beside her. "It is late, Frank," Rebecca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can it wait until morning?" "No," Frank said, stepping into the kitchen and closing the door behind him. "It cannot." Maria moved closer to Rebecca, and Rebecca could feel the younger woman trembling. She reached out and squeezed Maria's hand, trying to offer comfort even though she was terrified herself. "What do you want to talk about?" Rebecca asked. Frank took another step forward. He was not visibly drunk, but Rebecca could smell the whiskey on him. "I want to talk about the fact that you embarrassed me today, in front of the hands, in front of that mountain man. You made me look weak." "I did not mean to," Rebecca said, which was true. She had not asked Zachary to intervene, had not wanted the attention. "But you did," Frank said. "And now I need to make sure you understand that I am still in charge here, that you still answer to me." He was close enough now that Rebecca could see the anger in his eyes, the cruel set of his mouth. She knew what was coming, knew that he was going to hurt her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. If she screamed, the ranch hands might come, but they would not help her. They were all loyal to Frank, afraid of Frank. Frank reached out and Rebecca braced herself for the pain. But before his hand could touch her, the kitchen door burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. Zachary stood in the doorway, his large frame filling the entire space. His gray-blue eyes were cold as winter ice as they fixed on Frank. "Step away from her," Zachary said, his voice low and dangerous. Frank spun around, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. "I told you to stay out of my business." "And I told you that she is my business now," Zachary said. He moved into the kitchen with that same predatory grace Rebecca had noticed earlier. You have two choices, Frank. You can walk out of here right now and leave these women alone, or I can make you leave. Frank's face was red with rage. You are threatening me. On my own ranch. It is not your ranch, Zachary pointed out calmly. You are just the foreman, and from what I understand, you have been taking advantage of the owner's absence to abuse his staff. I wonder what Mr. Patterson would think about that. Patterson does not care what happens to the help, Frank sneered. They are replaceable. Maybe, Zachary said, but I bet he cares about his reputation. I bet he cares about people knowing that his foreman beats women when no one is looking. That sort of thing gets around. Makes it hard to hire good workers when they hear your ranch is run by a cruel drunk. Frank's hand tightened on his pistol. You are making a big mistake, Mountain Man. The only mistake here is yours, Zachary said. You have been hurting people who could not fight back. But I can fight back, Frank, and trust me, you do not want that fight. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Rebecca held her breath, certain that violence was about to erupt in the kitchen. Maria's hand was gripping her so tightly it hurt, but Rebecca barely noticed. Finally, Frank seemed to realize that he was not going to win this confrontation. He took a step back, then another. This is not over, he said, pointing at Zachary. You are going to regret interfering. I doubt it, Zachary said mildly. Frank stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls shook. In the silence that followed, Rebecca realized she was shaking all over. Her legs felt weak, and she grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Are you all right? Zachary asked, his voice gentle again as he approached her. How did you know? Rebecca managed to ask. How did you know to come? I saw Frank heading toward the house after the other hands went to the bunkhouse, Zachary said. Something about the way he moved told me he was up to no good. So I followed. You were watching the house, Maria asked, her English slightly accented but clear. I was watching for trouble, Zachary corrected, and it is good I was. Rebecca finally let go of the table and looked up at Zachary. He is going to make you pay for this. Frank does not forget grudges. Let him try, Zachary said with a shrug that suggested he was not particularly worried. I have dealt with worse than Frank Donovan. I am Maria, Maria said suddenly, offering her hand to Zachary. Thank you for helping us. Zachary shook her hand gently, mindful of how small it was compared to his. Zachary Ashford, and you do not need to thank me. No man should treat women the way Frank has been treating you. Not all men think that way, Maria said quietly. Then not all men are worth knowing, Zachary replied. Rebecca felt something shift in her chest at those words. This mountain man, this stranger, had now intervened twice to protect her from Frank. He had put himself in danger, had made an enemy of the foreman, all for two women he barely knew. It was more than anyone had done for her in years. You should go back to the line shack, Rebecca said, though part of her wanted him to stay. Frank might come back with some of the hands. I will leave when you two are safely locked in your rooms, Zachary said firmly. Where do you sleep? There is a small building behind the main house where the female staff stays, Rebecca explained. It has 3 rooms. Sarah, Maria, and I each have our own. Show me, Zachary said. Rebecca and Maria exchanged glances, then led Zachary out of the kitchen and around to the small staff quarters. It was a simple building, well-maintained but sparse. Each room had a bed, a small dresser, and a window. It was more privacy than many ranch workers got, but it was still humble. Do the doors lock? Zachary asked, examining the doors. They do, Maria said, but the locks are not very strong. Zachary tested one of the locks and frowned. These would not keep out a determined man, he thought for a moment. Do you have anything you can brace against the doors at night, a chair or a trunk? I have a trunk, Rebecca said. I have a chair, Maria added. Use them, Zachary instructed. every night until Mr. Patterson gets back. Brace them under the door handles so no one can force their way in." "What about you?" Rebecca asked. "What if Frank and his men go to the line shack?" Zachary's smile was grim. "I will be ready for them. Do not worry about me, Rebecca. I can take care of myself." Rebecca wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in his eyes. Zachary was not going to back down, was not going to hide. He had made himself her protector, and he was going to see it through no matter what. "Thank you," Rebecca said softly, "for everything." Zachary's expression softened. "You do not need to keep thanking me. Just stay safe, all right? Lock your doors, brace them shut, and if anything happens, you scream as loud as you can. I will hear you." "You will be able to hear us from the line shack?" Maria asked doubtfully. "I am a light sleeper," Zachary said, "and I know how to listen for trouble." He waited until both women were inside their rooms with the doors locked before he headed back toward the line shack. Rebecca watched him go from her window, his broad-shouldered silhouette visible in the moonlight. She touched her bruised arm, feeling the tenderness there, and thought about what Zachary had said. "No one is going to bruise your skin again. Not while I am here." It seemed impossible, too good to be true. But as Rebecca braced her trunk against the door and climbed into bed, she found herself believing it just a little bit. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be different now. The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn as always and made her way to the main house to start breakfast. She was surprised to find Zachary already there, standing near the woodpile with an axe in his hands. He had clearly been chopping wood for a while, because there was a sizable stack of split logs beside him and a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the early morning cool. "What are you doing?" Rebecca asked as she approached. "Figured I would make myself useful," Zachary said, setting down the axe. "The wood supply for the kitchen was getting low." "That is not your job," Rebecca protested. "You are here to do timber work, not chop firewood for the house." "I do not mind," Zachary said with a shrug. "Besides, it gives me an excuse to be close by." Rebecca understood what he meant. By working near the house, Zachary could keep an eye on her and make sure Frank did not try anything. It was thoughtful and protective, and it made Rebecca's heart do an odd little flutter in her chest. "Did you have any trouble last night?" she asked. "No," Zachary said. "I do not think Frank was stupid enough to try anything so soon. He will bide his time, try to catch me off guard." "That is what worries me," Rebecca admitted. "Frank is not stupid. He is mean and cruel, but he is also cunning. He will wait for the right moment." "Then I will just have to make sure that moment never comes," Zachary said confidently. He picked up an armful of the split wood. "Let me carry this inside for you." They walked to the kitchen together, and Rebecca found herself very aware of Zachary's presence beside her. He was so large, so solid, that she felt tiny in comparison. But instead of feeling intimidated, she felt safe. It was a strange sensation, one she had not experienced in a very long time. Sarah was already in the kitchen when they arrived, her eyes widening when she saw Zachary carrying wood. "What is going on?" she asked nervously. "Just helping out," Zachary said, setting the wood down by the stove. The supply was low. Sarah looked between Zachary and Rebecca, her expression disapproving. "Rebecca, can I speak with you for a moment? In private," Rebecca sighed, knowing what was coming. She followed Sarah into the pantry, where the older woman immediately started whispering urgently. "What are you doing, bringing that man around here? Do you have any idea how much trouble you are causing?" "He was just bringing firewood," Rebecca said defensively. "It is not about the firewood," Sarah hissed. "It is about you encouraging him. Frank is already furious about yesterday. If he thinks there is something going on between you and that mountain man, he will make all of our lives miserable." "There is nothing going on," Rebecca said, though even as she said it, She was not entirely sure it was true. There was something between her and Zachary, some connection she did not fully understand yet. Zachary is just being kind. Men like that are not kind without reason, Sarah said. He wants something from you, Rebecca. And when he gets it, he will leave and you will be the one left to deal with the consequences. Rebecca felt anger flare in her chest. You do not know anything about him. You do not know what kind of man he is. I know what kind of man he looks like, Sarah said. A drifter. A loner. Not the kind of man who sticks around or takes responsibility. You would do well to remember that. Rebecca wanted to argue, but she heard Maria arriving in the kitchen and knew they needed to start breakfast. She pushed past Sarah and went back to work, trying to ignore the doubts the older woman had planted in her mind. Was Sarah right? Was Zachary just going to leave when his work was done? And if he did, what would Rebecca do then? She had survived before Zachary arrived, and she would survive after he left. But the thought of going back to living in fear of Frank made her stomach turn. Zachary had already left the kitchen by the time Rebecca returned, but she could see him through the window, heading toward the northern pastures where the timber work would take place. She watched him go, then forced herself to focus on cooking. The days began to fall into a pattern after that. Zachary would work on surveying the timber during the day, but he always made time to be near the house during meals and in the evenings. He chopped wood, repaired a broken fence near the staff quarters, and even helped fix the loose shingles on the roof of the main house. He made himself indispensable, which made it harder for Frank to complain about his presence. Frank, for his part, seemed to be biding his time. He was coldly polite to Rebecca and Maria, but he did not try to hurt them again. Rebecca knew it was because of Zachary, because Frank knew the mountain man was watching. But she also knew that Frank was waiting for an opportunity, a moment when Zachary was not around to intervene. Rebecca found herself thinking about Zachary more and more as the days passed. She noticed things about him. The way he was always gentle when he spoke to her, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way he listened when she talked as if her words actually mattered. She noticed how hard he worked, how he never complained about the heat or the long hours. She noticed the way the other ranch hands started to respect him, even the ones who were loyal to Frank, because Zachary was strong and capable and fair. One evening, about a week after Zachary had arrived, Rebecca found herself walking to the line shack after her work was done. She told herself she was just checking to see if he needed anything, but the truth was she wanted to see him, wanted to talk to him without Sarah's disapproving glares or Frank's watchful eyes. Zachary was sitting outside the cabin on a rough bench he had constructed, working on repairing a leather harness. He looked up when he heard her approach, and his face broke into a smile that made Rebecca's heart skip a beat. "Rebecca," he said, setting aside his work and standing up. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Rebecca assured him. "I just wanted to see how you were settling in." "Come sit," Zachary said, gesturing to the bench. "It is not fancy, but it is better than standing." Rebecca sat down, very aware of how close Zachary was when he sat beside her. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the scent of pine and leather and honest sweat. "Has Frank been behaving himself?" Zachary asked. "He has been leaving me alone," Rebecca said, "but I know it is only because of you. Once you leave, he will go back to the way he was before." "What if I did not leave?" Zachary said quietly. Rebecca's head snapped around to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I stayed? Not just until the timber work is done, but longer. Permanently, maybe." Zachary's gray-blue eyes were intense as they looked into hers. "Would that be something you would want?" Rebecca's mouth had gone dry. "I do not understand. Why would you want to stay here? You live in the mountains. You are free up there. no one to answer to. Why would you give that up for a ranch job? Because of you, Zachary said simply. Because in the week I have known you, I have thought about you more than I have thought about anyone in years. Because when I see you smile, which does not happen often enough, it makes me want to find ways to make you smile more. Because the idea of leaving you here, of going back to the mountains and knowing you are down here dealing with Frank and whatever other troubles come your way, makes me feel like I am abandoning you. And I do not want to do that. Rebecca stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough, Zachary said. I know you are brave. I know you work hard and do not complain even when you have every right to. I know you are kind to Maria even when you are hurting yourself. I know you deserve better than what you have been getting from life. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand in his much larger one. I know that when I look at you, I see someone I could spend the rest of my life getting to know better. Tears sprang to Rebecca's eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever looked at her the way Zachary was looking at her now, like she was precious and worth protecting and worth knowing. I do not know what to say, Rebecca admitted. You do not have to say anything right now, Zachary said gently. I know this is sudden. I know I have no right to come into your life and start talking about the future when we have only known each other a week. But I also know that sometimes you meet someone and you just know. You know that this person is important, that they are going to matter. And you, Rebecca Norwood, matter to me. Rebecca found herself leaning closer to Zachary, drawn by the warmth in his voice and the sincerity in his eyes. You matter to me too, she said softly. I have been trying not to think about it, trying to tell myself that you are just being kind, that you will leave when your work is done and I will go back to being alone. But the truth is, I do not want you to leave. I want you to stay. I want to have time to know you better, to see if this feeling between us is real or just wishful thinking on my part. It is real, Zachary said with certainty. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly, and it made Rebecca feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. She found herself wishing the moment could last forever, that they could stay here in the peaceful evening with no Frank, no fear, no worries about the future. But reality intruded when they heard voices in the distance. Zachary's expression turned wary and he stood up, pulling Rebecca with him. Get behind me, he said quietly. It might be nothing, Rebecca protested, but she moved behind him anyway, trusting his instincts. A moment later, 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Frank was in the lead, with 2 of the ranch hands flanking him. All 3 men looked like they had been drinking, and Frank had a cruel smile on his face. Well, well, Frank said. Look what we have here. The mountain man and his little lady friend getting cozy. Go back to the bunkhouse, Frank, Zachary said calmly. You are drunk and looking for trouble. Do not find it here. Or what? Frank sneered. You think you are tough because you are big. I have 3 men here, mountain man. You are outnumbered. I do not think I am tough, Zachary said. I know I am, and numbers do not mean much when you are too drunk to stand straight. Now go, before this gets ugly. One of the ranch hands, a burly man named Tom, took a step forward. You talk big for someone who is alone. He is not alone, a new voice said from the darkness. Rebecca turned to see 2 more figures approaching. To her surprise, they were ranch hands she recognized, James and William, 2 younger men who had always been kind to her and Maria. They positioned themselves near Zachary, making it clear whose side they were on. What are you doing? Frank demanded, glaring at James and William. I am your foreman. You are a bully and a drunk, James said. His voice was steady despite the fact that he was much younger and smaller than Frank. "We have watched you hurt the women, watched you take advantage of Mr. Patterson being gone. We did not say anything before because we needed the jobs, but enough is enough. Zachary is right. You need to leave him and Rebecca alone." Frank's face turned purple with rage. "You are both fired. Get your things and get off this ranch." "You cannot fire them," Zachary said. "Only Mr. Patterson can do that. And somehow I doubt he is going to side with a foreman who has been abusing his staff and threatening his workers." "Patterson is not here," Frank spat. "And by the time he gets back, you will all be long gone." "I would not count on that," William said. "We have been keeping records. Notes about the things you have done, the people you have hurt. When Mr. Patterson gets back, he is going to hear all about it." Frank looked between the men, clearly realizing that he was not going to win this confrontation. The 2 ranch hands he had brought with him were already backing away, unwilling to fight when the odds had evened out. "This is not over," Frank snarled, but he was already retreating. "You will all pay for this, every single one of you." He stormed off into the darkness, his 2 companions hurrying after him. Rebecca let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, her whole body shaking with relief and residual fear. "Thank you," Zachary said to James and William. "That took courage." "We should have done something sooner," James said, looking ashamed. "We knew what Frank was doing, but we were too scared to speak up." "You spoke up when it mattered," Zachary said, clapping him on the shoulder. "That is what counts." William looked at Rebecca. "Are you all right, Miss Rebecca?" "I am fine," Rebecca said, though her voice was shaky. "Thank you both for standing with us." "Frank is right about one thing," James said. "This is not over. He is going to be even more dangerous now that he knows he is losing control." "Then we will just have to be more careful," Zachary said. "How many of the other ranch hands are loyal to Frank?" "Maybe half," William said. "The rest are either indifferent or would rather side with you, but they are afraid of the consequences." "We need to talk to them," Zachary said. "Make them understand that Frank's days as foreman are numbered. Once Mr. Patterson gets back and hears what has been going on, Frank will be gone. They do not need to be afraid anymore." "I can help with that," James said. "I will talk to the men I trust, spread the word." They talked for a while longer, making plans to protect Rebecca, Maria, and the other staff from any retaliation Frank might attempt. By the time James and William left to head back to the bunkhouse, Rebecca was exhausted but also strangely hopeful. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like things might actually get better. Zachary walked Rebecca back to the staff quarters, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. When they reached her door, he turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her. "About wanting to stay, about wanting to get to know you better, about you mattering to me." "I know," Rebecca said. "And I meant what I said too. I want you to stay. I want to see where this goes." Zachary smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Good. Because I have a feeling that wherever this goes, it is going to be somewhere worth going." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her skin. Rebecca felt her breath catch at the touch, at the tenderness in his eyes. "Good night, Rebecca," Zachary said softly. "Good night, Zachary," Rebecca whispered back. She watched him walk away into the darkness, then went into her room and locked the door. But tonight, for the first time since Frank had started his abuse, Rebecca did not feel afraid. She felt safe. And more than that, she felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change for the better. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange mixture of tension and growing affection. Frank kept his distance, but everyone could feel his rage simmering beneath the surface. He was like a rattlesnake coiled and ready to strike, just waiting for the right moment. The ranch hands split into two camps, those loyal to Frank and those who had decided to side with Zachary. The atmosphere in the bunkhouse and around the ranch was strained, with people choosing their words carefully and watching their backs. But for Rebecca, those 2 weeks were also filled with moments of unexpected joy. Zachary made good on his promise to stay close, and they spent time together whenever Rebecca's work allowed. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Rebecca learned that Zachary had grown up on a small farm in Colorado, that his parents had died in a harsh winter when he was 15, leaving him to fend for himself. He had gone into the mountains because there was nothing left for him in civilization, because the wilderness had felt more honest and less cruel than the world of men. Zachary, in turn, learned about Rebecca's quiet dreams of having a home again, a real home where she felt safe and wanted. He learned about her love of reading, about the books her father had kept in their shop that she had read and reread until the pages were worn. He learned about her mother, who Rebecca had never known but had always wondered about, and about the loneliness that had been her constant companion since her father's death. They did not kiss, though Rebecca found herself wanting to more and more as the days passed. Zachary seemed to be holding back, respecting boundaries, giving her time to be sure of her feelings. But the tension between them grew with every shared glance, every accidental touch, every moment spent in each other's company. Maria noticed, of course. One evening as they prepared supper together, she gave Rebecca a knowing smile. "He is in love with you, you know." Rebecca felt her cheeks heat. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes that does not matter," Maria said wisely. "Sometimes you just know, and he knows. Anyone with eyes can see the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" Rebecca asked, unable to help her curiosity. "Like you are the sun and he has been living in darkness," Maria said simply. "Like you are the most precious thing in the world and he cannot believe his good fortune." Rebecca's heart swelled at the description. "I think I might be in love with him too," she admitted in a whisper. Maria laughed with delight. "I knew it. Oh, Rebecca, I am so happy for you. You deserve this. You deserve to be loved by someone good." "He has not said he loves me," Rebecca pointed out. "He said I matter to him, but that is not the same thing." "Give him time," Maria said. "Men like Zachary do not say things lightly. When he tells you he loves you, it will be because he is sure and because he means it with everything he has." Rebecca hoped Maria was right. She wanted to hear those words from Zachary, wanted to say them back. But she also knew they had to be careful. Frank was still a threat, and Mr. Patterson had not yet returned. Until the situation with Frank was resolved, nothing was certain. Mr. Patterson finally arrived back at the ranch on a hot afternoon in early September. Rebecca was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion outside, and she rushed to the window to see a fine carriage pulling up in front of the main house. A tall, distinguished man with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard stepped out, stretching as if he had been traveling for a long time. "Mr. Patterson is back," Rebecca called to Sarah and Maria. Sarah immediately started fussing, making sure everything in the kitchen was spotless and ready for inspection. Rebecca felt a surge of hope. Now that Mr. Patterson was back, they could tell him about Frank's behavior. Surely he would do something. He had to. Frank appeared from the direction of the barn, his face arranged in a pleasant smile as he greeted his employer. Rebecca could not hear what they were saying from inside the house, but she watched as they shook hands and talked. After a few minutes, Mr. Patterson headed toward the main house while Frank went back to the barn, his expression darkening the moment the boss was not looking at him. Rebecca spent the afternoon nervously waiting for an opportunity to speak with Mr. Patterson. She knew James and William planned to talk to him as well, to present their account of Frank's behavior. But she wanted Mr. Patterson to hear from her directly, to understand the fear she and Maria had been living with. Her chance came after supper, when Mr. Patterson requested coffee in his study. Rebecca brought it to him, her hands shaking slightly as she set the tray down on his desk. "Miss Norwood, is it not?" Mr. Patterson said, looking up from the papers he had been reviewing. "Yes, sir," Rebecca said. "You have been with us for 2 years now, if I recall correctly. How have things been in my absence?" Rebecca took a deep breath. This was her chance. "Sir, I need to speak with you about your foreman." Mr. Patterson's expression grew serious. "Go on." Rebecca told him everything. She told him about the bruises, about the threats, about how Frank had become increasingly violent and controlling while Mr. Patterson was away. She showed him the fading bruises on her arm from the day Zachary had arrived. She told him about the night Frank had cornered her and Maria in the kitchen, and how Zachary had intervened. Mr. Patterson listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When Rebecca finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "I had no idea," he said finally. "Frank has worked for me for 5 years. He has always been tough, but I thought he was just a firm manager. I had no idea he was abusing my staff." "He is good at hiding it," Rebecca said. "He only shows his true nature when you are not around to see it." "This Zachary you mentioned, the mountain man I hired for the timber work, he has been protecting you." "Yes, sir," Rebecca said. "He is a good man. He and some of the other ranch hands have been keeping Frank in check, but we were all waiting for you to come back so we could tell you what has been happening." "I want to speak with this Zachary," Mr. Patterson said. "Can you fetch him for me?" Rebecca hurried to the line shack, her heart pounding with hope and anxiety. Zachary was there, cleaning up after a day of work. He looked surprised to see her. "Rebecca, what is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Mr. Patterson is back and he wants to speak with you. I told him everything about Frank." Zachary's expression became serious. "All right, let us go." They walked back to the main house together, and Rebecca led Zachary to Mr. Patterson's study. The ranch owner stood up when they entered, his eyes assessing Zachary with interest. "You must be Zachary Ashford," Mr. Patterson said, extending his hand. Zachary shook it firmly. "Yes, sir. Miss Norwood has been telling me about the situation with my foreman. I would like to hear your perspective as well." Zachary gave a concise but thorough account of everything he had witnessed and done since arriving at the ranch. He did not exaggerate or embellish, simply stated the facts. When he finished, Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate you protecting my staff. That took courage, especially since you were new here and did not know if I would support your actions." Mr. Patterson paused. "I want you to know that I do support them. Frank will be dismissed first thing tomorrow morning. I will not tolerate abuse on my ranch, and I should have been more vigilant about what was happening here." "Thank you, sir," Rebecca said, relief flooding through her. "As for you, Mr. Ashford," Mr. Patterson continued, "I would like to offer you Frank's position as foreman if you are interested." Zachary looked surprised. "Sir, I am a mountain man, not a ranch foreman. I do not know much about running a cattle operation." "But you know how to lead men," Mr. Patterson said. "And you know how to do what is right even when it is difficult. Those are the qualities I need in a foreman. The rest can be learned. What do you say?" Zachary glanced at Rebecca, and she could see the question in his eyes. She gave him a small nod, hoping he could read her support in the gesture. This was what he had wanted, a reason to stay, a way to be near her. "I will do it," Zachary said, turning back to Mr. Patterson. "But I have one condition." "What is that?" "If you hire me as foreman, I want your word that no one on this ranch will be mistreated. Not the staff, not the hands, not anyone. Everyone will be treated with respect and dignity, or they will answer to me." Mr. Patterson smiled. "You have my word, Mr. Ashford." "Welcome to the Triple Creek Ranch." They shook hands, and Rebecca felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. It was really happening. Zachary was staying. And more than that, Frank was leaving. She would be safe, Maria would be safe, everyone would be safe. The next morning, Frank was called into Mr. Patterson's study. Rebecca did not hear the conversation, but she heard the shouting. Frank's voice rose in anger, but Mr. Patterson's remained firm. When Frank finally stormed out of the study and out of the main house, his face was a mask of rage. He packed his things from the bunkhouse and rode off the ranch without saying a word to anyone, though the looks he shot at Rebecca and Zachary promised that he had not forgotten and would not forgive. But Rebecca could not bring herself to care about Frank's threats. He was gone, and she was free. For the first time in 2 years, she could walk around the ranch without fear. She could do her work without constantly looking over her shoulder. She could breathe. Zachary moved into the foreman's quarters, a small house near the main barn that was much nicer than the line shack. He threw himself into his new responsibilities with the same dedication he had shown with everything else. The ranch hands who had been afraid of Frank began to relax under Zachary's leadership. He was firm but fair, demanding hard work, but also showing respect and appreciation. Within a week, the atmosphere on the ranch had completely changed. Rebecca found herself falling more in love with Zachary every day. She loved the way he treated people, the way he listened and learned and worked tirelessly to make the ranch better. She loved the way he still made time for her despite his new responsibilities, still sought her out for conversation and companionship. She loved the way he looked at her, like she was the most important person in his world. One evening in late September, about a month after Mr. Patterson had returned, Zachary asked Rebecca to walk with him. They had fallen into the habit of evening walks, strolling through the ranch and talking about their days. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, an anticipation that made Rebecca's heart race. Zachary led her to a spot near the creek that ran through the ranch property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was beautiful, and Rebecca found herself wishing she could capture this moment forever. "Rebecca," Zachary said, turning to face her, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Rebecca asked, suddenly nervous. "I love you," Zachary said simply. "I have loved you since the day I met you, since the moment I saw Frank hurting you and knew I could not walk away. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you care for others even when you are hurting yourself. I love your smile and your laugh, which I do not get to hear often enough. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could feel this way about anyone. I thought I was going to be alone forever. But then you came into my life and everything changed. You made me feel safe and valued and cherished. You made me believe that I deserve good things. I love you, Zachary. I love you so much." Zachary's smile was radiant. He reached out and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Please," Rebecca breathed. Zachary leaned down, and Rebecca rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of all the emotion they had been holding back. Rebecca's hands found their way to Zachary's chest, feeling the solid muscle beneath her palms, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Zachary's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Rebecca felt like she had finally found her home. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Zachary rested his forehead against Rebecca's, His eyes closed as if he was savoring the moment. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Rebecca pulled back to look at him. "What? Marry me?" Zachary repeated, his gray-blue eyes intense as they gazed into hers. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a few months. But I also know that I do not want to spend another day without knowing that you are mine and I am yours. Marry me, Rebecca. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you and protecting you and making you happy." "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Zachary laughed with delight and picked Rebecca up, spinning her around until she was laughing too. When he set her down, he kissed her again, this time with more passion, more promise. Rebecca melted into him, into the kiss, into the knowledge that this strong, kind, wonderful man loved her and wanted to build a life with her. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Tulsa. Mr. Patterson gave Rebecca away, and Maria stood as her maid of honor. James and William and several of the other ranch hands attended, all of them happy to celebrate the union of the foreman and the woman he loved. It was a small wedding, but it was perfect, filled with love and laughter and hope for the future. Mr. Patterson gave them a wedding gift, a piece of land on the edge of the ranch property where they could build their own home. Zachary immediately began working on it, and by Christmas, they had a cozy cabin to call their own. It was small but well built, with a large fireplace and windows that let in plenty of light. Rebecca filled it with curtains and rugs and small touches that made it feel like home. She had a kitchen where she could cook for her husband, a bedroom where they could sleep wrapped in each other's arms, and a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set. Life settled into a happy rhythm. Zachary continued to excel as foreman, earning the respect and loyalty of the ranch hands and Mr. Patterson alike. Rebecca continued to work at the main house, but now it was because she wanted to, not because she had to. She and Zachary were saving money, planning for their future, dreaming about the family they wanted to build together. In the spring of 1883, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after supper, her hands shaking as she placed his palm on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Zachary stared at her for a moment, as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Rebecca had ever seen, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby." He was careful with her from that moment on, almost comically so. Rebecca had to remind him that she was pregnant, not fragile, that she could still do her work and live her life. But she also found his protectiveness endearing, a reminder of how much he loved her and their growing child. Their son was born on a cold December day, just before Christmas. The labor was long and difficult, but when Rebecca finally held her baby boy in her arms, she knew that every moment of pain had been worth it. He was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair like his father and gray-blue eyes that seemed to see everything. "What should we name him?" Zachary asked, his finger gently stroking the baby's cheek. "What about Ethan?" Rebecca suggested. "It means strong and enduring, like his father." "Ethan," Zachary repeated, testing the name. "Ethan Ashford, I like it." They named him Ethan James, after the ranch hand who had stood with them against Frank. James was honored and became a frequent visitor, doting on little Ethan like an uncle. The years that followed were the happiest of Rebecca's life. She and Zachary welcomed 2 more children, a daughter they named Grace in 1885, and another son they named Thomas in 1887. Their cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, with Zachary building on additional rooms with the help of the ranch hands. Rebecca often thought back to that day in August 1882, when Frank had grabbed her arm, when she had been so afraid and alone. She thought about how Zachary had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even known she was praying. He had kept his promise. No one had bruised her skin again after that day. But more than that, he had given her a life filled with love and safety and joy. Zachary proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving with their children. He taught Ethan to ride and rope, taught Grace to fish in the creek, carried Thomas on his shoulders as he made his rounds of the ranch. Rebecca would sometimes watch him with the children and feel her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. As the children grew, Rebecca and Zachary would tell them the story of how they met. The children loved hearing about their father standing up to the mean Foreman, about how he had protected their mother and then fallen in love with her. It became a family legend, proof that good could triumph over evil, that love could grow even in the harshest circumstances. In 1890, when Ethan was 7, Grace was 5, and Thomas was 3, Mr. Patterson called Zachary and Rebecca to his office. He was getting older now, in his late 60s, and he had been talking about retirement for some time. "I have a proposition for you both," Mr. Patterson said after they had sat down. "I am ready to retire and move to Denver to be closer to my daughter and her family. I want to sell the Triple Creek Ranch, and I want to sell it to you." Zachary and Rebecca exchanged shocked glances. "Sir, we could not possibly afford to buy the ranch," Zachary said. "I am not asking you to pay what it is worth," Mr. Patterson said. "You have been the best foreman I could have asked for, Zachary. You turned this place around, made it profitable and peaceful. And Rebecca, you have been a loyal employee and a good friend. I want the ranch to go to people who will care for it and for the people who work here. I want it to go to you." They negotiated a price that was far below market value, and Mr. Patterson even agreed to let them pay it off over time. By the summer of 1890, Zachary and Rebecca Ashford were the owners of the Triple Creek Ranch. It was a dream come true, more than Rebecca had ever dared to hope for. She went from being an orphan with nothing, afraid and alone, to being a wife, mother, and ranch owner. She had a home, a family, and a future that looked bright and full of promise. Zachary continued to work hard, but now he was building something for his children, a legacy they could inherit. He expanded the ranch's operations, bought more cattle, improved the breeding stock. The Triple Creek became known throughout Oklahoma as one of the best-run ranches in the territory. Maria married one of the ranch hands, a kind man named Carlos, and they had children of their own who grew up playing with Ethan, Grace, and Thomas. Sarah eventually left to live with her sister in Kansas, writing occasionally to let Rebecca know she was well. Even James and William stayed on, becoming trusted foremen themselves as the ranch grew. Rebecca took over managing the household staff, making sure that everyone who worked at the Triple Creek was treated with respect and fairness. She remembered too well what it was like to be at the mercy of a cruel boss, and she was determined that no one under her watch would ever feel that way. She became known for her kindness, and ranch hands would often tell their friends that the Triple Creek was the best place to work in all of Oklahoma. In 1893, when Rebecca was 33 and Zachary was 39, they welcomed a surprise: twins. 2 little girls they named Hope and Faith, because that was what they represented. Hope that life could always surprise you with joy, and faith that love could sustain a family through anything. Zachary joked that their cabin was getting crowded with 5 children, but Rebecca saw the pride and happiness in his eyes every time he looked at their family. They built an addition to the house, making it a proper ranch house with enough room for everyone. The children grew up strong and healthy, surrounded by love and the wide open spaces of Oklahoma. Ethan showed an aptitude for ranching and announced that he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. Grace loved the horses and became an excellent rider, winning competitions at the local fair. Thomas was quieter, preferring books to cattle, and Rebecca encouraged his love of learning, remembering her own father's appreciation for education. Hope and Faith were inseparable, getting into mischief together and keeping their parents on their toes. Through it all, Rebecca and Zachary's love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by the life they had built together and the challenges they had overcome. They still took evening walks when the children were in bed, still sat on the porch and watched the sun set, still held hands like young lovers even as their hair started to show threads of silver. Rebecca never forgot where she had come from, never forgot the fear and loneliness of those years working under Frank's cruelty. But she also never dwelled on it. That part of her life was over, finished the moment Zachary Ashford had stepped into her life and refused to let her suffer alone. He had promised that no one would bruise her skin again, and he had kept that promise. But he had given her so much more than protection. He had given her love, family, purpose, and a future worth living. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Zachary gave Rebecca a beautiful necklace with a pendant shaped like a mountain peak. "To remind you of where I came from," he said as he clasped it around her neck, "and how I found my way to you." Rebecca touched the pendant, tears in her eyes. "You saved me," she said softly. "No," Zachary corrected, pulling her into his arms. "We saved each other." And that, Rebecca thought as she rested her head against her husband's broad chest, was the truest thing anyone had ever said. They had saved each other, and in doing so, they had built a life that was richer and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined on that hot August day in 1882, when a foreman's cruelty had led to a mountain man's protection, and protection had blossomed into the deepest, truest love. Their children grew up and had children of their own. Ethan took over running the Triple Creek when Zachary decided to step back in his 60s, though Zachary never fully retired. He was too much a part of the ranch, too connected to the land and the work. Grace married a neighboring rancher and had a large family of her own. Thomas went to college and became a teacher, but he returned to Tulsa every summer with his wife and children. Hope and Faith both married local men and settled nearby, keeping the family close. Rebecca and Zachary were blessed with grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. The Triple Creek Ranch remained in the family, a legacy of hard work and love that passed from generation to generation. The story of how Zachary and Rebecca met became a family legend, told and retold to wide-eyed children who could barely imagine a time when their beloved grandmother had been afraid and alone. But Rebecca never forgot. Even in her old age, she would sometimes run her fingers over the spot on her arm where Frank had grabbed her all those years ago. There was no scar, no visible mark, but the memory remained, and so did the gratitude. Gratitude for the mountain man who had appeared when she needed him most, who had seen her worth when she had almost forgotten it herself, who had loved her with a fierce and protective devotion that never wavered. Zachary passed away in 1920 at the age of 66, his body finally giving out after a lifetime of hard work. Rebecca held his hand as he took his last breath, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. His last words were, "I love you, Rebecca. Always have, always will." Rebecca lived another 8 years, surrounded by the family she and Zachary had created. She died peacefully in her sleep in 1928 at the age of 68, and the whole community turned out for her funeral. She was buried next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the Triple Creek Ranch, the land they had loved and nurtured for so many years. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, Ethan had inscribed a simple phrase that captured the essence of his parents' love story. She was cherished. She was protected. She was loved. And indeed she had been. From the moment Zachary Ashford had grabbed Frank's wrist and said, "Let her go," Rebecca Norwood's life had been transformed. The foreman had grabbed her arm too roughly, but the mountain man had made sure no one ever bruised her skin again. More than that, he had filled her life with love, joy, and purpose. He had given her a family, a home, and a legacy that would endure for generations. The Triple Creek Ranch still stands today, still owned and operated by the descendants of Zachary and Rebecca Ashford. Their story is still told, a reminder that even in the hardest times, even when life seems dark and hopeless, love can appear when you least expect it. And when it does, it can change everything. Rebecca had started as a woman alone, afraid, working in a harsh environment under a cruel boss. She had ended as a beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and matriarch of a thriving family and successful ranch. The journey from one to the other had begun with an act of protection, a stranger refusing to let injustice stand. But it had continued with choice after choice to build a life together, to love each other through good times and bad, to create something lasting and beautiful. That was the true legacy of Zachary and Rebecca Ashford. Not just the ranch, not just the children and grandchildren, but the proof that one moment of courage, one act of kindness, one decision to protect someone in need can ripple out and change the world. Zachary had stopped Frank from hurting Rebecca that day, but he had done so much more than that. He had shown her that she deserved better. He had given her hope, and he had loved her with everything he had until his last breath. And Rebecca had loved him back just as fiercely, had built a life with him that honored the gift he had given her that August day in 1882. She had taken the protection he offered and transformed it into partnership, had taken his love and returned it 1,000-fold, had taken the chance he represented and built something extraordinary. Their love story was not just about a mountain man protecting a woman from a cruel foreman. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who recognized something precious in each other, and who chose every single day to honor and cherish what they had built together. It was about strength and gentleness, protection and partnership, courage and compassion. It was about a promise made and a promise kept. The foreman had grabbed her arm too roughly, but the mountain man had made sure no one ever bruised her skin again. And in doing so, he had written a love story for the ages, one that would be remembered and celebrated by their descendants for generations to come. A story that proved love could triumph over cruelty, that kindness could overcome fear, that one person standing up for what was right could change everything. And on that hill, overlooking the Triple Creek Ranch, two headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of Zachary and Rebecca Ashford. The wind whispered through the grass around them, carrying the sounds of the ranch they had built, the laughter of the great-great-grandchildren they had never met but whose lives were shaped by the love story that had begun so long ago. It was a good ending, a happy ending, an ending that was really just a beginning, because true love never really ends. It continues in the children who carry on the family name, in the values passed down through generations, in the stories told around dinner tables and in rocking chairs on front porches. Zachary and Rebecca's love story lived on, would always live on, a testament to the power of protection, devotion, and a love that conquered all obstacles. The foreman had grabbed her arm too roughly, leaving bruises that would fade within weeks. But the mountain man had touched her heart, leaving an imprint that would last forever. And that made all the difference.